Hello? Coming
Hey, how
in?
are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Mike.
No problem.
I just want to discuss the third topic on your behind you, trans woman or woman. Uh, how do you know if someone's trans then?
By first of all, we ask them obviously, and if they are exhibiting very consistent and strong, uh, you know, types of experiences, like they feel gender dysphoria, they feel strange, they feel ostracized. These are very key indicators that somebody is transgender. We could also take a look at brain chemistry, brain structure, and see if they share similarities with cisgender women or men with their respective genders. Um, so there are various ways we do this psychologically, scientifically.
Yeah, so I guess that the first question that comes to my mind is, on one hand, you're using a very psychological approach of saying, "Hey, do you feel like you want to transition, or do you feel like you are the opposing or another gender?" On the other hand, it's a biologically based approach, a biopsychology based approach. We're looking at like brain structure and brain chemistry. Just want to make sure I get the position clarified, so I'm not straw manning you. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So I guess that the first like question that pops in my head then, let's just say, for example, someone transitions. They go through HRT, they go through both top and bottom surgery, they fully transition, but then you look at their brain structure and they present with a brain that does not align with their current gender expression.
Oh, yeah. There is no such thing as a distinct male or female type brain. There is a spectrum of different brain types, and there's not always going to be perfect correlations or perfect, identifications of these types of brains. So, yeah, relying on just a the MRI scan on its own is going to be very difficult at the current moment. So, but I don't understand your point, though. I don't
Well,
understand where
my
this needs to.
point is, even if it is spectrum, there's not a like one to one correlation. This is the male brain and this is the female brain. The fact that you admitted
Right,
there's
but
a
but
spectrum,
there are correlations we can
yeah,
look at
yeah. But if
that would
there's like,
indicate that would indicate gender. Yeah.
yeah, my argument then is, if there's this correlation that you're talking about, but then that person does not have a single correlation to, say, a female brain, if they're a trans woman, why are you using that as evidence then? It self-admittedly, that's not a perfect, yeah, it's not perfect. You can't actually use that.
If you think that's how epistemology works, you're mistaken, right? We don't look for perfect situations every time. We look at correlations. We look at correlated data, and we find out what is the where the correlations are. It's not going to be 100% perfect. I don't know. I don't understand this kind of
Well, maybe I
objection.
was misspoke when I said perfect, but it has no correlation whatsoever in this specific individual. And I do know a couple trans individuals that live in a very left wing state, mind you. So I'm not trying to pull this out of my pull it out of the behind side of mine, but
But look.
yeah,
Just because you can find a case, I'm sure there are cases where you look at somebody who considers themselves trans, and we find very little correlation with the other people who are trans. What does this have to say about anything?
well, because you're using it
The,
as
the
evidence that there's
problem,
these biological correlations, and we can use these
but
correlations to
no. The
determine if someone's
correlations
trans.
don't mean that they're the correlations don't mean again that there are distinct brain types.
Well,
That's not what I said.
you
So
said it's a
you're
spectrum. That
assuming that.
means
You're
you said
assuming
there's
that.
a spectrum automatically. That assumes that there is one binary and another binary in that spectrum. So I can.
No, I never said that there is one. There are binary brain types.
You
I
said it's
never
a
said that.
spectrum, though. You said it's a
There,
spectrum,
there is a
and
there's a
and that there's
spectrum.
strong
Yes.
correlations. That it's not an
Hold
absolute
on.
causation, but it's a correlation, right? And that male
Yes,
brains are generally
in
correlated with
most
one type of
cases,
structure.
in most
Yeah.
cases, we find correlations between trans brains and cisgender brains. Now, we're going to get lost in nuance sometimes because there are things about the brain that we still don't quite understand. So, what you're actually objecting to is something that is within our current limitations of the scientific method or the scientific experimentation of the brain, and not the principle,
Yeah,
which
but
is
that
people
objection
get
is a
trained
completely
because of
valid
brain type.
to that that objection is completely valid to your argument because you're using biopsychology and basically arguing from some form of biological determinism that a person is trans because of the brain type of being a trans individual of that specific gender expression they're trying to transition to.
The point is that the evidence largely indicates correlations between brain types.
Yeah,
Period.
but and
It
in
doesn't mean that in
situation,
every case. Hold on.
yeah, sure.
It doesn't mean that in every case there are going to be correlations. There are some cases where there aren't any correlations, but there are still people who exhibit those psychological features, which that itself is evidence. So again, we take both of these evidences, not just one, but both of them. We take all the evidences. And
Well, I mean,
again, even if we can't find evidence in this one particular column, well, the other columns are going to have evidence.
well, the other
And
column too.
that's how
Sorry.
we dictate. That's how we dictate these kinds of things. We don't just say, "Oh, look, this person's brain doesn't match with the others, therefore they're not trans." We look at other factors, and
Yes.
that's what we're dismissing.
Well, can
So
can I address the
this
other
doesn't.
factors?
This does not attack anything except for you
No,
can't
no.
be.
Let me. Well, respectfully, with the other factors, is I watched the last debate you just had with the guy about veganism, and you said there's no free will, and it seems like you take a determinist position. So it seems like those psychological factors are also biologically determined. Then, so it seems like all of your basis is on.
Why?
Yeah,
You're not attacking anything by
no,
saying
I am
I'm
attacking.
determinist. Okay, determinism is compatible with everything I'm saying.
Yeah, so then the question then arises is if you're gonna say, hey, being trans is biologically based, there's a biological or biopsychological psychological base to it, and then I expose a hole into it with the simple question of, okay, what
You
about
didn't
people who don't?
expose a hole.
Yes, you did
didn't
because you're
expose
claiming there's a
hole.
dude. I let
didn't
you go on for
expose it.
5 minutes. You
No,
gotta
no,
let
no,
me.
no, 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 no.
You gotta
didn't
let me
expose it.
finish. You gotta let me finish,
No,
man.
You didn't
Keep
expose
crashing
a hole.
out. Keep
What
keep crashing
you
out. Keep crashing out.
Yeah, see,
Keep crashing.
this is what they want to do, right? You didn't expose a hole. Look, there were correlations between weather patterns. Does that mean every time the humidity is at 100%, that means it's going to rain? No. To even suggest that every time humidity reaches level 100%, that means it's going to rain. Oh, look, there's one time where it was 100%, but it didn't rain. That doesn't mean
that's the argument,
that
though.
there is no
that's
correlation between
exactly-
humidity and rain. That's not how correlations work in science.
No.
So you didn't
can't
expose a
use it
hole.
as
What you've
evidence. You
exposed
can't use it
is,
as evidence,
oh, look,
though.
I don't understand
You can't use it as
epistemology.
evidence, though.
I don't understand how science
No,
works.
you're
That's what you
trying to make
exposed,
a deductive argument.
and then you've omitted the
using
other
inductive
factors,
logic.
which
You're
is
debating who's that,
psychological,
dummy.
which we don't even need the brain scans. You can forget the brain scans entirely. The psychology is alone is great evidence that people are transgender.
Yeah, and your psychology is
And that there is
based
a
on
correlation
those brain scans because you're a biopsychologist.
psychology
You're
in
dependent
general.
upon biological determinism. You got wrecked.